Hi, this is Bill Kenny with Test My Pitch, and I want to welcome you to the Mentor Magic webinar. It's really wonderful that you're with us today. Just so you know, I'm going to be going off screen in a moment to show you slides. We'll walk through not only the programming that we've planned, but also answer the questions that have been pre-submitted. Then I'll come back on screen at the very end and answer any additional questions. You should see an ability in the screen, depending on whether you're in Google Plus or in YouTube, you should see an ability to add or submit questions, and we certainly invite you to do that as we're going along. So please enjoy this. It's actually been fantastic how many questions have come in on this topic. And we do talk to customers, ecosystem builders, companies every day that are challenged to build effective mentor networks and to engage mentors in a really meaningful way to help the mentees move forward in whatever endeavor they're aiming to do. So without further ado, I'm going to hop into slideshow, and sometimes this takes one or two attempts to get in successfully, but I'm feeling lucky today, so let's see how we do. If we're at all successful here, you should see my slides coming up any moment. And here they are. So again, our whole goal today is really focused on mentor programs, and in terms of particularly focusing on the mentor. How do we attract, engage, promote, and create very strong mentors? So I thought this quote was really appropriate. Where you are going, ask someone who has been there before. So the idea that we can't know everything, and mentors really help us move forward much quicker. So our agenda, actually, we're going to actually shift up from this agenda just slightly. So we're going to talk about the background of mentorship and mentor programs. That'll be fairly quick. We'll talk about some common challenges that we see. In fact, we'd call them the top 5 challenges. And then we're actually going to combine the next two. We're going to lead with your questions and then apply our remedies to those. So we're going to very much aim to answer your questions as we go through this, and we thought this might be a much more effective way to go. So in any event, let me pop through to the next. Oh, as I understand it, you're not seeing my slides, so I'm going to back out. This is a trick just to make sure that you're paying attention. So let me pop back out real quick. And as I said, sometimes Google Hangouts just a little bit finicky for us, so we will absolutely get back in here. So let's do this. So let's try this again. Okay. Now, in theory, we're screen sharing with you, and I'm going to go to here, and ideally you're now seeing my slides. Just holding 1 second until they come back on the screen for me. I've gone into presentation mode here. It's just taking a second. Yep, I'm understanding that you're not seeing my slides yet. So I'm going to try this one more time with feeling here. If not, we'll just proceed through, and let's give it one more shot. I apologize for this. This is always fun with technology here. So just 1 second, just waiting for Google to give us an okay here. Okay, I'm going to go in a slightly different way. Okay, here we are. Okay, so hopefully now you're seeing my slides, and again, I'm going to go into presentation mode so that we've got them on the big screen here. So you should see the slide of the quote by J. Loren Norris. If you cannot see where you're going, ask someone who has been there before. And then next will be the agenda. And you've got background, common mentor challenges, and again, we're going to combine remedies for your system and your questions. So this gives you a sense of all the questions that we're getting, really great volume. It's super, and we're going to work through each of these as we go. So, all right, so as I understand it, you're still not seeing my slides. This is a little bit frustrating. I apologize. I'm going to try one more way here. So you should see me back on screen. Oh, I'm so sorry, folks. So let's go this way. Okay, that's not working well. I don't know what is going on with this, but I apologize. Okay, so I'm going to just leave it in not presentation mode, but I'll leave it so that the slides are on the screen and you'll see the column to the left. Hopefully you're now seeing my screen. Everything is telling me that you should be, but you know, we can't delay here. So just so you know a little bit about us, Test My Pitch is an online platform that helps students, entrepreneurs, and professionals improve their communication skills. We create private communities that allow that to happen. Think of it a lot like Toastmasters online. And then Score My Pitch is a pitch event judging and feedback system. Hopefully that gives you a little context for our perspective. We work with everything from corporations to educational institutions to entities that are economic development related all around the world. So let's get into the background about why mentor programs are important and valuable. So again, I'm going to run through this. I apologize that the slides are not on the screen. We will record this for anyone that we'll record this again, making sure the slides are on the screen. There's not much I can do about it at the moment other than to apologize. And again, we'll run through the content now and then record it and share the recording with you. So our audience is diverse today. We're talking to folks who run mentor organizations at universities, who run them in corporations, and who run them in economic development organizations such as accelerators and incubators. And mentees work together, and if you could only see the image on my slides, it would really help. But when we look at mentors and mentees, essentially it's an individual with great wisdom and someone who is nascent or early stage or fledgling who could use that wisdom to move forward. The mentor relationships actually exist in nature, and so every animal species has a mentor relationship with sort of the younger, if you will, cubs of the species, relying on the elder, more adult members of the species to help train them, to help prepare them for what they need to do to move forward. And certainly it's a high leverage way to create the transfer of knowledge, information, and wisdom so that individuals can move forward. When we look at the sort of mentor and mentee relationships, really the opportunity is with where we look at mentors and mentees are sort of brought together by organizations. Again, it could be corporations, it could be economic development related, it could be within educational environments, and ultimately it's this sort of organization that facilitates the process, that manages the process, that instigates and ignites the process as well. And so that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today: is how do we manage and create that in a way that is highly meaningful. So when we look at how organizations and mentors succeed, they only succeed when the mentees succeed. And so we want to make sure that that alignment is sort of important and identified up front, because we have to, the first sort of rule here is how do we make sure that the mentees succeed? And as long as everything we do aligns with that objective, then we're going to do really well. And I think where, sort of the most common area where we see organizations fail is when they stop putting the mentee first. And so if you put the mentee first, just as if you put the customer first, you really can't go wrong. And that's kind of the basics here. So here are the 5 common mentor challenges that we see. Number one is a lack of a clear objective, and this happens all the time, and quite often it actually kind of goes back to what we just said: is focus on the mentee, sort of everything else takes care of itself. Sometimes we see organizations shift their sort of focus to sort of satisfying the mentor or satisfying the organization, and they forget about the mentee, and that's the beginning of the spiral down. As the quality of mentees decline, the quality of mentors decline, and the quality of the organization declines. The second issue that happens is that the activities and methods are not aligned with the objective. And so we want to make sure that those activities and methods, the things that we're doing to sort of prosecute our work, they need to be aligned with that objective. And again, going back to sort of rule 1, it's all about the mentee. So we want to make sure that everything we do is creating the results and outcomes that we're hoping for that mentee or that group of mentees. The third issue is that more often than not, organizations are really challenged to articulate a strong value proposition. And the picture in this is really funny. And so I'm very sorry you can't see this. So a bald guy with a brush, trying to apply it to his needs, which he doesn't, of course, need a hairbrush. So we want to make sure that that value proposition is very focused and relevant to the audience we're looking to attract. The fourth issue or challenge is that more often than not, there's a lack of merit-based resource allocation. And what I mean by that is that there are some organizations that apply their resources evenly, or sometimes even tip them towards the most needy part of their community, and what we see is more often than not that makes the mentors work harder than the mentees, and that's never a good situation. This is about creating independence, and we want to create a situation where the mentee is the one who is responsible and is accountable to move things forward, and then the organization applies the resources to those who are putting in the greatest effort and getting the greatest results. So the fifth, and this can be a large challenge as well, and that is the lack of refreshment and renewal of the network. And you'll see as we get into the questions, there were several questions around, sort of how do we retain folks? How do we make sure that the quality is good, and so on. And ultimately, this is about how do we make sure that that number one, our network is committed, and so that our mentors are available and interested, and then how do we prepare them to be as effective as they can be. And so we want to make sure that this is addressed as well. So these 5 challenges moving forward are sort of general categories that we're going to work on in as we go through answering the questions. So let's hop into the questions. And we've got a good amount of time, so I'm going to slow down just a little bit as we get into this. I wanted to make sure that we sort of jump through the preamble fairly quickly so that we could really spend good time on your questions. So the first couple of questions were around getting started and how do we get started effectively? And so let's go to those questions. So the first question is, how do you get started in building a mentor program? And these will be fairly general responses, but we can talk in a little more detail. So number one, we need to define an objective. Who do we serve? Why are we serving them? And what outcome do we want for them? Second, we need to align programming and resources to the objective. So whatever tools, whatever resources, whatever programming that we're creating, it needs to be created with those objectives in mind, and it needs to align to those objectives. So if we're going to do training, the training needs to be appropriate for those objectives. It needs to move our resources towards those objectives. And the third and final element here is we need to measure the results we're getting as we're going forward and continue to evolve and adjust our system to continue to sort of do better and be more effective and efficient. And so this is really, I think we can make this much more complicated, and ultimately where we see organizations challenged is when they lose track of their objective, and again, one of the stakeholders ends up or set of stakeholders ends up sort of moving the eye off the ball, if you were, and so you end up serving the wrong audience and serving them in a way that is incongruent with the outcome you're looking to attract. So when we think of the objective, every mentor network really is dealing with the same persona, and that is you're dealing with a fledgling, with a hatchling, with probably a fairly vulnerable either individual or entity that needs nurturing, that needs care, that needs protection. And so, the objective should really be about, number one, first is sort of do no harm, and then two is to do everything possible to allow that again, either individual or entity to move past this stage to the next stage where they are independent and self-fulfilling and so on. But ultimately, while they're in your care, they are just that. They're in your care. And it's sort of how do you manage through that so that you make the process effective. So the next question within getting started, how are mentors and mentor networks managed in schools via an individual school or centrally within a university? So, actually we don't find that there's a big difference in how mentor networks are managed in schools or other types of organizations. That tends to be fairly consistent. Where we do see some differences and actually some significant advantages at universities is that in schools, there's generally a better access to some resources, and particularly faculty, alumni, and there's in fact a pre-existing community. The school or educational institution creates that, where more often than not in other situations there isn't a pre-existing community. It has to be built. So if you're in an incubator or a business accelerator or any other type of economic development organization, the first step is really actually engaging that community. And the sort of educational institutions have the benefit in that the community is there. It's just a matter of how do you get them into this particular activity. So the next area we want to talk about is how do we attract, train, and retain mentors. And there are a whole bunch of questions in this area. So starting with, how do you recruit quality mentors, and how do you attract the mentors you need versus the ones that volunteer? That can be a little hairy, right? So we want to have a program worthy of quality mentors. And that's really, if you have a program that's worthy of quality mentors, you will have no problem attracting quality mentors. It's actually very similar to what we see happen. We see a lot of organizations that are looking to attract really good investors. And if you don't have to worry about attracting good investors if you have good ventures. Good investors will find you if you have investment-worthy companies. It's funny how money finds opportunity. And so rule number one, have a program worthy of quality mentors. And there are a lot of variables that can go into that, and I think we'll address several of them as we go forward. You need to have a compelling value proposition. So what is it that the mentors and the mentees are going to get? And they may be two different value propositions, but what does each get, and why is that important? And then finally, as you have sort of the quality, or as you're ready to go to market, it's really about network. So as you get one or two good mentors on board, it's really about engaging them. Who do they know who would also make a good mentor? And it's funny, they tend to know each other. And certainly before sort of you see any mentors come on board, engaging sort of your community to ferret out those key people. But it's really, using your network as much as possible. You can certainly do e-blasts and all those kinds of things, but your best quality, your best individuals will come from networking effectively. So next is, how do we keep volunteer mentors engaged? How do we communicate effectively and receive responses from mentors? How can we create value for mentors in terms of training and keeping them up to date with the latest news from the startup world? How do we connect mentors with helpful resources? So I've kind of grouped these together because they have some sort of common responses. So once we have mentors who have agreed to be in our within our network, then it's really about a series of steps. We should have some type of onboarding, and that might include initial training and orientation, everything from the simple things like knowing where the restrooms are to having a review of the organizational standards. So, what are our sort of rules of engagement? Are there certain things we need to know about follow-up and or reporting and so on that are important, and are there standards around the types of interactions and how we care for the people we're mentoring and so on, and what their responsibility is to us. Next, after we've onboarded, of course, people will get into the system, they'll begin mentoring, and what you'll find is that skills will wane or not progress as quickly as possible unless you have a process for ongoing skill building. And this can be everything from sort of programmatic workshops or periodic workshops to peer-to-peer learning. You might even have co-mentoring. You could have younger mentors mentor with senior mentors. I mean, there are lots of methods here that could do it. And certainly the more mentors are trained by your better mentors, not only probably the better the training will be, but also the more you'll engage and in some ways respect and honor the people who are really your informal leaders or maybe even formal leaders within your mentor network. Having a methodology for session feedback. So whether that's electronic or paper-based, but having a way for mentors and mentees to report in about progress, about milestones, about their experience with the mentor or mentee, all those types of things will add into your ability actually to do the next couple of things, which is to have different types of resources, articles, case studies, and best practices that are reposited somewhere that anyone can resource. And ideally, where if a mentor is looking for sort of resources within the network who have experience so that they can help a mentee, that it's easy for them to find that information and connect the mentee either with that information or that individual that maybe could help take the person to the next level. Next is really about periodically affirming interest and commitment. And so this can actually be important for several reasons. We as a company have been through a few different mentor programs, and these were actually really good, well-respected mentor programs. But even so, we found that actually not very many of the mentors on the list were all that interested in mentoring. And so what we found is it was almost like the Pareto rule, sort of 20% seemed to be doing about 80% of the work. And so it would literally take us 5 phone calls, 5 emails, 5 outreaches to sort of 5 different individuals, and that may be multiple outreaches, but connecting with 5 different people to get a response from one. And that seems a little challenging. And so what we derive from that is that these networks, and they were, again, well-meaning and all that, but that they didn't have a very good culling process to weed out people who didn't want to be engaged, at least not at an active level. And so you might think about having different grades of mentors, and 2 really simple ones are, you might think of a program mentor and maybe a casual or informal mentor. Some people call them coffee mentors, but that's someone who is infrequently available, maybe for a call or a coffee meeting. And then the program mentors are much more sort of engaged in a regular basis. They might be assigned to specific mentees or whatnot, but ultimately having a way that affirms periodically each mentor's interest in continuing to mentor and at what level is really important, because we want to make sure that we build the appropriate expectation, because if we don't, it's going to be hard to continue to attract good mentees, and therefore it's going to be really hard to attract good mentors. And so having that way to, whether it's every 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and it's probably going to align with whatever your program is, but we want to have a way to assure that the people that we're promoting as mentors are actually ready to be mentors, and not just from a training standpoint, but from an availability standpoint and an interest standpoint. So the last question here in attract and retain is, how do you handle attrition? And first of all is you need to expect turnover. And you can't see my screen, I don't think. Yes, you have a picture of a turnover on the screen. Okay, so number 1 is we have to plan for attrition. It's going to happen. We should expect it. So on one hand, we need to plan for it, which means first and foremost, we need to always be recruiting. Recruiting needs to be an ongoing part of what we're doing. It's the better programs we've seen have what we would call a farm system. In other words, they have this sort of onboarding process, and then those new mentors go into some kind of sort of a early stage mentor group or classification, so that maybe they have to co-mentor for a period of time, maybe they have to do a certain number of activities, but there are some steps possibly before they have their first sort of one-on-one mentor meeting, or that there's a limit to how much mentoring you allow them to do, or how many individuals you allow them to work with, until they've had a certain amount of experience. And it's going to be that experience and the feedback from that experience that allows them to move to whatever the next level is, a senior mentor or something like that. So we want to, retention is first about making sure that we've got something worth retaining. And then certainly as people progress to better levels, then promoting our top performers, again, being a senior mentor. And people brag about this, about the fact that they're a mentor with, XYZ organization, or that they're a senior mentor, or they're a lead mentor. And I think looking to give those individuals some track. From here you can progress to here or there. You might have people, and I would separate this out, because you have certain people that are highly qualified, really good mentors, and you don't want to distract them from mentoring. On the other hand, there are people that are pretty good mentors, but are actually even better leaders and or managers. And it's really, I think, the better mentor networks identify those individuals and empower those that are more sort of leaders and managers. Maybe they run the training and onboarding, and can take part in the facilitation side of mentorship. And then those that are your top performers from a standpoint of actually being really high quality mentors get the sort of the majority of caseload and the majority of work, so that you're really utilizing your resources well. Again, being sensitive not to burn people out, but the point really is that you can create this farm system that allows you to identify those that are early versus those that are senior and experienced, and utilize them in the most effective and efficient ways for your organization. And having that hierarchy not only allows people to aspire to something and to move to something, but also a situation where you can easily identify those who can help the organization more. And what I end up seeing quite often is organizations thinking that they need to do everything in the management of their mentor network, and that really isn't true, because a lot of your mentors, some don't have any time, some are really busy, others are retired and actually have some time and some interest in rolling up their sleeves and being more involved, and certainly creating an infrastructure to help them do that is really key. So mentees, so we're going to talk about mentees now, and really the whole goal of mentees is to get them to the place where they can fly on their own, and that's ultimately the real key here is we want to give them a launch pad where they can kind of move from where they are now to self-flight. And so they are probably not going to get off the ground for a while. They may need a co-pilot for a while, but then we want to get them to the place to where they can be independent and fully functioning on their own. So a bunch of questions in this area. First, a couple are, how do we mentor match with a good fit for the mentor and the mentee based on personality and skills, etc.? And then the second question within that is, who actually pairs mentors and mentees? So there are a variety of techniques that you can use to match mentors and mentees, and these are, I think, a handful of the ones that we see being used. So that you could have meetups and a variety of social events to get mentors and mentees on the same room and allow sort of an organic process to allow them to connect and socialize and find common ground and begin working together. You can set up speed dating of some form to allow them to meet each other. You can have a concierge, and this is probably the most common way, and that is to have essentially someone who knows the mentors fairly well, knows the mentees fairly well, and they take logical guesses or facilitate people getting connected. And again, this is probably the most common way we see. You can use personality profile and skill assessment tools to begin analytically making matches. And then there are software tools, and we're going to actually dive into some of the software tools in a little bit, but there are some software tools that you could use as well that may help you in making better matches and sort of managing those relationships. The next question, how do you handle scheduling meetings between mentors and mentees? I think this is probably a pretty simple answer, and I haven't seen many cases where it deviates from this, and that is normally the mentors and mentees manage their schedules. So normally we don't see organizations managing that. It's usually up to the individuals to coordinate their time together. Next question, how do you keep the startup people motivated to learn more and get out and talk to people? In other words, customer discovery. So this is actually, of all the things we're going to talk about today, this is probably, from my standpoint, the most important. So going back to where we see organizations challenged, number 4 that we stated earlier is that organizations generally do not assign their resources on a merit basis. So the first sort of recommendation here is to make resource access merit-based. In other words, that you want to create a situation where the mentee is working as hard or harder than the mentor or the organization. And so that there's, the first set of accountability should be with the mentee, and that responsibility should lie strictly in their lap. So one of the real effective ways that we've seen to do this is to develop program stage gates. And so there should be some qualifications to enter to get the first access, and maybe some qualifications to a first level within the program and a second level within the program, and so on. One of the, maybe one method we've seen, and this is actually done by the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, and that is they actually make your first meeting free, and there's no sort of obligation, and there's no further commitment. And it's after that first meeting then that there's actually stage gates to continue forward. And so they actually have some requirements if you want to move forward. But the idea is they want to be very open and accessible, but they also know that having accountability and making sure that the mentee is working just as hard, if not harder, than any of the other stakeholders is really the cornerstone of making sure the program's successful. Because again, the whole idea is to make those individuals or entities to make them independent, and that's not going to happen if we're working harder than they are. So, and then the next thought is to have corresponding resources and benefits to accomplishment. And so again, we control the allocation of those resources, and it's important that we do. So the next question, how can a mentor help with the success development of a startup? I think there are really just a couple of thoughts here. Number one is there are really only 2 things a mentor can relate or transfer. Number one is knowledge, and the other is relationships, so connections. And so it's those, focusing on those 2 things, and then how they do it is the best methodology is normally Socratic. In other words, we don't give people answers, we ask them questions, and we help them discover the right answers for them. Because again, our goal is to help them be independent, and that's only going to happen if we help them learn how to problem solve, if we help them learn how to do personal inventories, organizational inventories, to find out and discover what they need and what path they should take. So the last couple of questions in mentees: how much interaction does the program director need to have with individual mentors and mentees to create an effective relationship? And how much oversight is needed to facilitate a successful mentor relationship? So this, I think, is simple, and this may be simplistic, but we would say ideally very little interaction from the program director, and they may check in periodically. They certainly should quality assess and assure, and it's probably more than anything else customer service in terms of relationship building and making sure that everyone knows that the program director is accessible as needed. But there should be an infrastructure, and again, it could be all volunteer, it could be that sort of farm program or that mentor hierarchy that we talked about earlier. But ideally, if that's functioning correctly, then the program director should not be needed, but they should be accessible. And so it's really that balance. So systems are really the key to making this whole thing succeed. And it's not only that, it's really about, how do you make sure that it has legs, that it is going to, that your mentor network is going to be sustainable and it's going to last not just short term, but for generations. Now we want to talk about sort of management and measurement tools. How do we manage and mentor? So there are a whole bunch of questions, as you can see within this. So what infrastructure is needed to manage a mentor-mentee network? There are really just three, and those are mentors, mentees, and a concierge. It can be that simple. So in other words, it could be you have a pool of mentors, you have a bunch of people that need mentorship or mentees, and then you've got someone in the middle that's simply facilitating those connections. You don't need anything more than that. There are many organizations that run with just those simple tools. And other than that, it's email to connect people, meetings or whatnot to connect people, and so on. So then the next couple of questions here: how do you maintain consistent quality among the mentor community? How do you handle mentors who are not doing their role effectively? How do you hold mentors accountable when they are volunteering their time? Okay, so I think ultimately for the first response here is go back to rule one. So we're focused on making sure that highly vulnerable mentee is cared for and managed well. And this is not to say that mentors have any ill will. 99.9% are 100% focused on doing the right thing. The issue is, do they know what the right thing is? And so how familiar are they with the organization's standards, with the organization's mentors and methods and tools? And are there methods, standards, and tools that the organization has, and how sort of relevant are they? So it's really, we haven't seen yet, and there are mentors, and this happens infrequently, but does happen, that are primarily focused. They're typically service providers. They're primarily focused on selling within the mentor group. And of course, it's important that the organization have standards that restrict and or eliminate that. But that said, every once in a while, you're going to have to manage through maybe a variety of different situations, maybe that one, maybe people that are underperforming. But ultimately, we haven't yet seen a mentor who comes into a situation wanting to perform poorly. What they're probably experiencing is either sort of a lack of a sense of what they should do, or sort of making it up because there's sort of limited sort of framework for them to sort of prosecute their work. And so we want to make sure our methods and standards and tools are clear and known. We want to stay aligned with the objective. In other words, again, caring for that mentee and with the goal of helping that mentee become highly independent and highly functioning. And then, of course, there are going to be those situations where we're going to have to sort of help a mentor either improve their skills, and that may be demoting them for a period of time. It may be, sort of having individual coaching sessions, or it may even include helping them, sort of find their success somewhere else. In other words, excuse them from service of your organization. That's certainly not something we want to do. But again, if our goal is, and we're clear on this, is to help the mentees, if there's anything incongruent with that, it's our job to take care of it. No one else will. It's our job. We own it. And so we have to make sure we do it. So the next series of questions, wow, there's a bunch. So this is from a mentor network in Venezuela. Thank you and welcome. I want to learn about methods to develop, execute, and control the program. How do you keep track of what type of mentoring people want to do, successfully match mentors with companies, and track the effectiveness of mentors? How can I better track my mentor partnerships while they are in progress? How do we track mentors' time and interaction? They have reported, this particular organization has to do reporting. And what are some of the recommended tools for tracking, reporting mentor-mentee engagement? So I'm sure many of you are interested in this. So there are a variety of solutions. By far, I would say the most common is the sort of human or concierge approach. Some will progress on to create spreadsheets to manage the process and the individuals. Others will develop custom solutions, so they'll actually write their own software that's specific to their program. And then these are 5 different tools that we've seen and that some of our customers are using. And I would say generally we've heard that they're happy, although on the other hand, we haven't talked to anybody yet that is over the moon in terms of that their mentor software does everything they're hoping for. So we'll certainly provide these. So micromentor or micromentor.org, Cronus, and that's cronus.com. There's VineUp, and that's vineup.com. There's LaunchSpot, and that's launchspot.io. And then there's SkipSo Labs, that's skipsolabs.com, and you may want to do a /EN for English, and that will get you to the English version of their site. I believe they are German or French, I'm not sure which. But so these are the top 5 softwares that we've heard of, that our customers have told us about, that they're at least happy with. Again, I think where this software, software is in general, there's always a few unique situations where you would hope for some other functionality, and we've probably heard that across the board with each of these. Again, all good, but folks looking for some tweaks as well. So again, most common is the sort of concierge human approach, but there are certainly other solutions. And again, just to remind you, for those that can't see my screen, we'll be recording this, and you'll see all the slides, so that all of this information will be in writing for you as well. And I can even send the links in a follow-up email. So the sort of last series of questions here has to do with additional resources. So really, as we provide any additional resources, the whole goal here is to get you from point A to point B in the most direct way possible. And so the first individual says, not so much a question as much as I would like access to networks of mentors who we can model in best practice. And then another individual asked, how can I become a better mentor? So these links might well be important for any of the infrastructure that you have or are looking to create. And these are really, really fantastic. So these are the top 4 sort of mentor resource sites that we found, and I should say mentor program resource sites. So Triple Creek Associates has created a site called PCADDIC. It's PCADDICK.com, PCADDIC.com. And then there's the National Mentoring Partnership, mentoring.org is their site. There's BYU Venture Mentoring Service, which you can get to by going to the marriottschool.byu.edu site. But again, I'll send out this link. It's a little bit longer than that. And I'd rather not confuse you. And then the final site within this group is the MIT Venture Mentoring Service, and it's vms.mit.edu. All 4 of those would have wonderful materials for you in terms of various infrastructures. There's also some resources. Somebody asked about, how do I become a better mentor? And there are 2 really good articles. One is in Forbes, and the other one comes from the Drucker Institute. The one in Forbes is How to Become a Great Mentor, And then the one on the Drucker Institute is 10 ways to be a better mentor. Again, I'll share these links and apologize for any that can't see my screen, but we'll get these to you. There's one other sort of resource and opportunity within Mentor Network. So I'm going to maybe take 2 or 3 minutes here just to explain this. So as a company, we're involved in a variety of community building activities in Connecticut. We're based in Connecticut, and actually we're also involved in some national community building activities. One of the activities is something we started not quite 2 years ago now, called, actually it's about a year ago. We started a year ago. It's called the Connecticut Mentor Cooperative. And so as we were out doing a variety of other community building activities, we saw that there were 20 to 30 organizations in Connecticut that had entrepreneur-facing mentor networks. But they all were at sort of different places in the sort of evolvement continuum. And so what we've done is created bridges between those organizations, and that the sort of underlying organization that facilitates their sort of getting together, their connection, is this Connecticut Mentor Cooperative. And so our goal is 2 things. One is we want to improve the efficacy of mentorship in the state, and 2 is we want those bridges. The goal of creating the connection between the networks is that we found, sort of our observation is, any given network can probably serve 90 to 90 or 95 to 99% of its needs, but every once in a while there's a discrete need that the sort of organization can't satisfy. And usually it has to do with some industry-specific connection or knowledge. And so for those discrete needs, the idea is these pathways or bridges between the networks will help sort of socialize those needs and actually have some potentially cross-network connections that happen. And again, the goal isn't that your mentors are my mentors or your sort of mentees are my mentees. The goal is that these are just to socialize very discrete needs to make just-in-time or real-time connections that are very short-lived, very temporary, and just to handle that discrete need. And so, and I share this now with this offer in that we've socialized this with many other ecosystems around the country, and in fact several around the world, and folks are interested in connecting into our mentor cooperative. And so what we have done is we have codes of conduct, metrics of success, and some other standards that we're open sourcing. And if you're interested in this, let me know if you'd like to create a cooperative in your area and potentially link into ours. We'd be absolutely tickled to help you with that, and to and certainly to move this forward with you, so that the ability of your entrepreneurs can be amplified by our network and vice versa. And that's really what we're aiming to do. So again, let me know if you're interested more on the Connecticut Mentor Cooperative. I'm happy to share. So some final thoughts and some things that will help us bring this home. So number one is, as a mentor sort of organization, or an organization that has a mentor network, you provide 3 core things. You provide resources, you provide structure, and then finally you provide privileges. And it's really your ability to conduct that process that is key. And so you have to think, this is your concert. You need to be the conductor. You need to run the process. You need to have the system and the standards. You need to have the method of communication that the whole band understands, so that ultimately you play good music. And certainly in doing so, you want to be nimble. You want to begin to evolve and adjust your systems so that you can create the greatest impact. So one other quick thing before I come back on screen, and that is our next webinar is going to be on June 23rd, and it's a Thursday. It's going to be on building community, and the subtitle is How to Diversify Beyond the Usual Suspects. So one of the things that we see quite frequently in communities we work with is this sort of, it could be that they're pale and male, or that there's some other challenge in not just the volume of people that are coming to the events, but the diversity of those individuals. Whether that diversity has to do with industries, backgrounds, gender, sort of any type of ethnic diversity, and so on. We really mean diversity in the broadest way you can define it. And so really key that we have engagement, and we've learned a lot of great things, and would love to share them. So I'm going to come back on screen, and again, for those that have stuck with us here, we really appreciate you doing so. And we will re-record this with the slides and all that for any that couldn't see them. We definitely apologize for the technology challenge, but I'm going to just check to see if there are any other questions that have been submitted here. I don't see any other questions. You guys gave us just wonderful questions pre-workshop, so we really appreciate that. I guess the kind of closing thought here is certainly we're more than glad to expand on any of these. We'd love to have one-on-one conversations or group conversations with you and your team. And certainly if you're interested in anything that we've talked about, be it our tools or some of the content today, we'd certainly love the conversation. And we will, just so you know, we'll follow up and certainly would love to have additional conversation with you. So it's a beautiful day here where I am. I hope it is where you are as well. And it's been great to have you. Again, we will record this with the slides, and we'll have that out, I would say, sometime tomorrow. Again, I very much apologize for the technology challenge, but it's been great to have you, and I really hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks so much. Take care for now. Bye-bye.